How we doing, everyone? Welcome to the first of the 4P's, product. Remember what I said in the first module, that marketing strategy, all things marketing, is a function of one or more of the 4P's. We call that the marketing mix. Okay? The first one we want to touch on is product. Now, when we talk about product, right? Product is the actual thing. The brand name, the quality, the package, the features, the actual product of itself. Now, later in this presentation, we are going to talk about services, okay? Which services is a product, but there are distinct characteristics that are different than physical products or goods. Okay, so this is a product. Just grab this. This is a little 32 gigabyte storage thing for my camera. Why I'm drawing a blank. Let me give a better example here. Look, here's a mouse, an iHome cheap Bluetooth mouse. Yes? This is a physical product. However, you can have the physical product and you can have associated services related to that product. For instance, not many of us go out and buy a car in cash. So we need to finance the car. Without the financing, we can't buy the car, the actual physical product. And also, I'm not much of a mechanic. It's not like I change my own oil or I do the brakes. So I need to go to a place to get the car serviced. These are associated services related to the product. Okay? We will talk about services, but just remember that a product is part of the equation. There are physical, tangible things. There are associated, intangible things sometimes. Both of these deliver the value, the what's in it for the actual customer. So when we talk about products, we can talk about specialty, we can talk about shopping, we can talk about convenience, and we can talk about unsought products. So let's start off with convenience. Convenience is simple. This is the product can be found anywhere all the time. This is a Coca-Cola. These are salty snacks. These are candy bar, gum. You can be in a supermarket, you can be in a convenience store, you can be in a roadside stand. They are sold everywhere and anywhere. These are convenience goods, convenience products. Okay? Let's then talk about shopping products. Shopping products tend to be available in different locations, and we tend to shop the same product in different locations looking for either the better financing or the better price or the better availability. So this we could be price comparing Amazon, Target, and Walmart for the same one or two things. These are shopping products. Specialty products are only available in certain locations. Okay, they tend to either be specialty and unique, or they tend to be high-end and premium. High-end and premium, we can talk about Tiffany's, we can talk about Rolex, we can talk about, things along those lines. Specialty, we could be talking about something like hobby shops. My son likes remote control cars and remote control boats. Okay, so those are not available in every toy store. They're not available in every Walmart. This is a specialty type thing that you can only get in certain locations. The last of these quadrants is unsought. These are goods and services, well, we're talking about products, that we have to buy that we don't want to buy. The classic case for this, and please forgive me for being morbid, is funeral services. Caskets, urns for ashes. This is unsought. We could also talk about a number of insurance categories. Life insurance, that's probably one of the most uncomfortable conversations I ever had. These are unsought products. So we can talk about companies and their product mix and their product line. Okay? So the line goes from left to right on your screen. So this is Kellogg, based in Battle Creek, Michigan. They have a ready-to-eat cereal line. They have toaster pastry line. They have cookies and crackers line. And they have natural and organic and frozen line. Okay? Now, we can talk about the mix within each line. If you look at the ready-to-eat cereal, guess what? It's kind of a deep list as the depth, the number of categories within a product line. If we compare that to natural, organic, and frozen, there isn't a whole lot of depth there. There's only 3 different products. When we talk about breadth, it's the number of product lines. And here we see Kellogg, the breadth is 4 different product lines for breakfast cereals. Well, actually, cookies and crackers are not breakfast. Okay? A major component to the product is the brand. And when we think about branding, we have to think about all the things that come up and make up a brand. It could be the name itself, because sometimes names are created specifically for a perfect example is Lexus. Lexus is a name that is created because it sounds luxurious. Haagen-Dazs. Haagen-Dazs sounds premium, but it was created, it sounds German, it sounds European, it sounds very unique. It was a brand name created specifically because it sounded that way. It's actually, this stuff was made in New Jersey originally. You know, the brand name, the URL, google.com is part of the branding of Google. Logos, symbols. We can see a Louis Vuitton bag from quite a distance. Characters, i.e. Jolly Green Giant, Mr. Clean. Slogans, like the Ultimate Driving Machine. Or sounds and jingles, like the Intel Inside. Doo-doo-doo-doo. I mean, when it all comes down to it, a brand is a mental shortcut. And the more connections you have in your brain about that brand, the more it is memorable to you. So if I say Mercedes-Benz, you can, okay, Mercedes-Benz, you got the name, the URL is not that big of a deal. You probably thought of the round logo with the They don't have any characters there. BMW is the ultimate driving machine, but it doesn't have, I don't think Mercedes-Benz has a specific slogan. Not sure they have jingles and sounds. But as soon as I said Mercedes-Benz, certain associations with that brand came to mind. If I say Nike, right, certain associations that you are familiar with come to mind. If I say, this is a Swell bottle, okay? Maybe you're familiar with Swell bottles. Maybe you're not. Maybe there isn't as many associations that come to mind. That's why I called it a mental shortcut. The more associations you have in your brain about a particular thing, the stronger it is branded in your neural net. Branding. If the brand is strong enough, the brand has some kind of equity. The brand is so strong, the brand is so well known, the brand is so ubiquitous. The brand awareness is so, we talk about Coca-Cola, we talk about IBM, Microsoft. It's funny, this is 1999 and Apple's not on this list. And if we did this list something like this, there's no question Apple would be in the top 5, if not the top 3. Nokia's 5. We all had Nokia cell phones at one point, didn't we? If we have strong brand equity, we could also have strong brand loyalty. Consumers who are loyal to a particular brand are less price sensitive to that brand. From the marketing manager's perspective, it is significantly cheaper to market to customers that are already brand loyal. It doesn't take as much marketing mix arsenal to convince someone who's already loyal. Yes? It helps firms insulate themselves from competition a little bit. It also helps firms, if there is a brand misstep or a slight customer failure at some point, the equity and the loyalty over time insulates a little bit from switching costs. There's lower switching costs with loyalty. If we have a really strong brand, we can extend that brand into related categories. I grew up on Crest. I grew up using Crest, and Crest was just toothpaste. Well, a natural extension would be other products that have to deal with mouth cleaning. So the toothbrush, the mouthwash, the Glide. The Crest brand is strong enough to extend beyond just toothpaste. And you could say Crest is all things mouth cleaning related. However, you can go too far. Just because Crest is a strong brand, specifically about mouth cleaning, doesn't mean you can create Crest deodorant or Crest perfume or cologne or Crest soap. All of a sudden, if you confuse the brand associations we have in our neural net, the brand meaning gets diluted. If we have a really strong brand, we can license that brand to other categories. For instance, maybe some of you like coffee. Maybe some of you go to Starbucks. Well, Starbucks has an incredibly strong coffee brand, and they license that brand to other coffee products that Starbucks doesn't make. For instance, the Frappuccino in a jar that's cold, Starbucks does not make that, even though it says Starbucks. That's actually a Pepsi product. Pepsi has the license from Starbucks. They make the product, distribute the product, sell the product, and they pay a small fee to Starbucks for using their name. Maybe you were in the frozen food aisle and you were in the ice cream area and you saw Starbucks ice cream. Well, Unilever makes the Starbucks ice cream. And they do the sales, the distribution, the manufacturing, and they pay a small licensing fee to Starbucks. I mean, we've all been in a mall and we've all seen Disney stores, and I'm going to tell you right now that Disney does not manufacture anything. Every Disney product you see in that Disney store is a license, and some other company is making it. The packaging impacts or is part of the brand associations with the brand. We can see a Snapple bottle from 50 feet away. Well, maybe not that far. I need glasses, but the Coca-Cola bottle has a distinct shape. The Snapple bottle has a distinct shape. I'm going back to Swells. This is a Swell. These are knockoff Ray-Bans, but the Ray-Ban is the iconic. Whoa, do I look cool? No, not really. I'm a professor. The Ray-Bans are our iconic glass styles. You know that shape means something, right? Labeling is a very big deal. Specifically in today's day and age where we're looking for organic or natural or gluten-free or no nitrates. These are part of the overall image of a particular product. All right, let's switch topics a little bit. If we're talking about products here, we have to talk about the development of new products. We call that new product development. So why do firms create new products, or why do they have to create new products? Well, consumer behavior changes all the time. There's all kinds of competition, and the market gets saturated, and then there's no growth. Fads. Things come in, things come out. You don't want to be on the wrong side of a fad. And finally, sometimes we need to manage risk and create new products because we want to generate new revenue streams because we don't know how long our existing revenue streams are going to last. So we're hedging our bets and we're managing overall firm risk through the diversification and creating new products. All right, this is a central conversation here when we talk about new product development, and it's called the diffusion of innovation. This is from Everett Rogers' super famous book called The Diffusion of Innovations. I think it was in the late 80s the first time he published it. It's in the 5th or 6th edition at the moment. And what he found is he was trying to explore how long it takes a given population to adopt a new product. Time to adopt a new product, a new innovation. What is that process? And what he found is that it tends to follow a bell-shaped curve. Surprise, surprise, it's statistics here. And about 2.5%, he called them the innovators, the early adopters. No, innovators, I don't want to call them early adopters. The innovators provide some feedback. They provide some capital for the R&D investment. They love to be the first person to try something. They are a valuable value. If the innovators don't start using a product, it'll never get to the early adopters. Now, the innovators and the early adopters, you're looking at about 15-16% of the entire population. If you have early adopters and innovators, okay, you probably have enough wind at your back for the product to really start growing. Because the early adopters will fuel early majority. And if we get the early majority, we're looking at about 50% of the population using a particular product or service. And then we can get to late majority, which would take us up to about 84%. And then finally, he called the latter group the laggards, when you get as close to 100% as you possibly can. I just listened to Apple's latest earnings call, and clearly we are in very late majority stage when it comes to these devices. Okay, the majority of the people here in the United States use one of these devices. We are in late majority. We can still find people that do not, like my mom does not, but my dad does. So we're clearly in late majority there. We can go through all kinds of products. You guys might be using ride-sharing services like Uber and Lyft. We're well beyond the innovators and the early adopters there. We're probably somewhere in early majority. There's still a lot of people that have never been in an Uber and never have done a Lyft. Okay? We're definitely not in late majority there. We're going to talk more about this in a couple of slides. So this conversation is coming back. Hold that thought. So part of this diffusion of innovation theory is, okay, if I have a new product or I have a new service, how can I get through the early adopters to late majority faster? And there are 4 factors that impact how quickly the general population adopts and starts using a new product. And the first one is compatibility. If the new innovation is very compatible with what they used to do in the past, it will adopt faster. If you look at a DVR compared to a VCR, it was basically the same thing. They were very compatible with one another. If we look at Uber compared to a taxi, they're relatively compatible. Sure, there are differences. Same thing with a DVR versus a VCR. But they're relatively compatible. Observability. The more you can see other people using the product or service, the faster it will diffuse. If you never see anyone using it, it doesn't pique your curiosity, it doesn't raise your awareness, you won't use it. It won't adopt very fast. I remember when the original iPhone came out that was 97, and I could go an entire week on the train computing. I lived in Boston at the time, and I wouldn't see one on the train. That was the original one. It was very expensive. There wasn't that many manufactured. I remember when Teslas first came out. I have a long commute now at Seton Hall. I could go a day or 2 or 3 without seeing a Tesla on the New Jersey Turnpike. Now I can't go more than an hour without seeing a Tesla on the New Jersey Turnpike. Probably half hour at this point. It's not like a Ford where I'll see one every 10 minutes, if not quicker, or a Toyota, I'll see one every 3 minutes. But I'm starting to see a lot more Teslas. Trialability. How easy is it to try a particular product or service? Okay? If it's easier for you to try without purchasing, it will diffuse faster. If it's very difficult to try, then it won't diffuse very fast. And finally, and the most important, is relative advantage. When we get to the strategy section towards the end, one of our final modules, we'll talk about competitive advantage explicitly. But for all intents and purposes, if the new product or the new service doesn't add anything beyond the existing product or the existing service, why would I buy the new one? If there is no relative advantage of the new versus the old, it won't adopt all that fast. So when we talk about this new product development, we usually talk about it in terms of 6 stages. There is some idea generation. Okay, we'll have a whole new slide. Concept testing. Then we do some product development. We do some market testing. We do a launch. And then finally we do evaluation. So let's talk about some of these in turn. Idea generation, ideas can come from many types of sources these days. When you think about crowdsourcing, there's no question we have customer input. Many of you have been part of a beta for software, download a beta. So that's customer input that helps drive new ideas. We can benchmark our competition. Guess what? We look at our competitors' products. Our own internal R&D could come up with new ideas or new products and services. We could go out to research and development labs, either universities or private labs, and look at Procter & Gamble. Procter & Gamble at one point was like the king of internal R&D, but they needed more growth. So the then CEO said, guess what? We need to go to labs to find new ideas. And the Swiffer came from a lab in Boston, and the Mr. Clean and Magic Eraser thing came from a lab in the East, I'm going to say Japan. P&G did not develop those 2 products. Licensing, we already talked about licensing. It's a good way to come up with some new ideas. And good old-fashioned general brainstorming, but I don't know how that's any different than internal R&D. So when we talk about concept testing, well, you might have a good idea, but you might need to do some research on this idea. You could do focus groups. You can do some A/B testing on the web. You can do some, thought exercises. You can collect some data to see if it's a viable product or a viable service. If it is a viable product or a viable service, you might do some alpha and beta testing. You might develop a prototype. You might really, go full tilt and actually have to manufacture something. And then you may want to test it in a certain section of the market. We call it a test market or a pre-market test, where instead of launching nationally from the get-go, you might launch in Newark, New Jersey to get some market testing information before you go national. Finally, we have actual launch. Usually, when we get to the promotion P, product launch usually involves lots of promotion. So we would add those kinds of things. We might also do some product bundling. So if it is Crest is launching new Glide a floss. Maybe they give you a sample within every box of toothpaste that you get, so you get a little, you can try it before you actually have to buy it. Okay? So I already just hinted at this when we're talking about product launch. It's probably hard to do product launch without thinking of the other 3 P's in beyond the product P, particularly promotion, price, and distribution place. Now, I'm not going to really harp on those yet because we haven't talked through those, but I'm going to reiterate what I've said earlier, that marketing strategy is a function of the 4 P's, the marketing mix. It's pretty hard to talk about one P with how it impacts the other P's. A convenience product like a Coca-Cola needs to be placed, distributed all over the place, needs to have ample promotion because it's a category that you don't think about a whole lot, so you need to be reminded to buy. And because it's a convenience product, it probably needs to be lower price. Alright, this is a biggie, product life cycle. And this is what I wanted to come back to the diffusion of innovations conversation. But first, let's talk through this, and then I'll bring in the diffusion of innovations conversation. So in a product life cycle, it tends to go through this phase of introduction, growth, maturity, and decline. Introduction, we see this solid sales line, and it goes, slightly gradual, and then growth is a very, very steep growth, and then maturity is kind of getting flatter and starting to turn downward, and decline finally starts to drop. And we see this sales curve. If you notice the profit curve, the dotted line underneath of it, most of introduction were unprofitable. Think of the R&D costs or the extra promotion costs you need to get a new product off the ground. We're profitable maybe for a little bit at the end of introduction. We're very profitable towards growth, but if you notice, the growth dotted line curve starts to flatten before the sales curve does. Think about why that's the case. And the profit dotted line drops negatively faster in maturity compared to the sales curve. And we might be barely breaking even again in decline. So I just want to blurt a little bit about that, the difference between growth and maturity between the sales curve and the profit curve. Think about it. You got a product or service, and you introduce it, and it's kind of interesting, and you get some traction with innovators and early adopters during the introduction phase, and then you want the early majority. That's growth. Okay? In the growth stage, competition around you realize you start making a product, and they start copying it and making it as well. So there's probably not that much competition during introduction. There's probably more competition towards the end of growth. In maturity, there's probably a lot more competition. And you need to use more of your marketing mix, like couponing, cheaper prices, more advertising, because maturity is a zero-sum game where the only time you're going to grow is if you steal market share from your competition. During the growth stage, everybody's gaining in market, everybody's gaining in revenue, because the market is growing that fast. That's like double-digit growth there. In maturity, you barely have single low-digit growth there. So we're expending more of our marketing arsenal during maturity than we are in growth. Hence, maturity is less profitable than growth is. And finally, decline, So if we go back to the adoption and diffusion here, innovators and early adopters is introduction. This is growth. This is maturity. And this is decline, roughly speaking. Now, before we get into that, a lot of this I just described when we were looking at the slide. It is difficult to a caveat of this thinking is, well, how do we know which stage are we really in? Are we really in maturity? I mean, if we would go down to Atlanta and we would talk to the Coca-Cola people and say, yeah, Coca-Cola, flagship Coca-Cola, yeah, I'm going to say it's decline, at least maturity. And they're going to try to convince me it's growth. And they're going to invest in growth. You know, I personally think, they realize it too, that they're beyond maturity with the flagship Coca-Cola. As a matter of fact, when they advertise Diet Coke or Diet Zero, and not Coke. The diet products are selling, much faster than the regular flagship colas. So, I think they're in maturity or decline. All right. Now that we talked about products, we need to talk about services. Because products and services are similar but different. They're similar in that they both deliver value. But products are physical. This is an MP3 recorder. This is an actual product. This has a nice USB. I can plug it right into my computer. Very handy as a professor. Right? Services. Here are the 4 things that are easily distinguish the differences between products and services. A product is physical and tangible. A service, like a hotel stay or an airplane ride, insurances, lawyers, doctors, they are intangible. They are intangible. Okay? The next one is, let me just do this. First one's intangible. Right? Services, there might be things that you can physically touch, like the hotel bed that you sleep in, but what you're actually paying for, which is to have a room in another city so you can go to a conference, that part of the value delivery is in essence intangible. Services, you can't separate production and consumption. So this little handy dandy puppy was probably made in China. Okay, it probably has, let's say 50 different parts from various different countries that are all shipped to a certain location in China, probably Shenzhen somewhere, because that's where all the tech products. It was designed in Tokyo, but manufactured in China, according to the back of this. We can source the parts for 3 months, manufacture for 2 weeks, ship out to the rest of the world for 4 weeks after that. So over the course of like about a 3-month period, we source, manufacture, and ship, and then it's eventually sold. So that is the manufacturing and consumption process of a physical product. Services are produced and consumed at the same time. The hotel stay starts when you pay. The taxi ride service experience starts when you pay. Disney, the service experience starts, well, they pick you up at the airport, so they think it starts way back when. But, we think about, you pay the ticket, you go through the turnstile, you're on Main Street, and the service experience value delivery starts. You can't separate production from consumption with services. Okay? The other component is variability. Okay? So Olympus makes this, and Apple makes this, and Swell makes this. Right? Speaking of this, let me get a sip of water so I can get through this slide deck. So this is a stainless steel double-walled water bottle that if you put ice in it and you put water in it, it'll probably last about 24 hours before it doesn't get cold. In the middle of the summer, if you have ice in this thing and you keep it in your car and you come out at the end of the day, it's still going to be cold. These are very, very good. Well, a Swell bottle, they can make 1 million Swell bottles, and the millionth one and the first one are going to be just about identical. They vary very little. In the manufacturing of goods and services, the manufacture of goods, this is the microphone I'm talking to you right now. It's a blue Snowball microphone. You could go to any store, Target, Best Buy, Amazon, Alibaba, and there are blue microphones, and you can buy them from any of the stores. It's all the same microphone, and it'll ship to you, and it's all the same. It's the same as the same as the same as the same. Products vary very little. Services, ooh boy, they vary. You could go to your favorite restaurant on a Tuesday, and on a Wednesday, go back to your same favorite restaurant at the same time, have a different server, a different chef, and a different food delivery company that brings the food in, and your experience will vary significantly more compared in a 24-hour period. Now, we tend to try to reduce the variability in services by training. We try to automate some processes. We try to use some technology to help us. But services vary to a greater extent than products do. Perishable. So this thing has a value, and even though it'll be a year old in October, okay, this has value. I could sell it, right? Hit pause for a second. Products, because they're manufactured and they have a resale value, they last. But as much as you would love to keep that wonderfully comfortable bed in the Ritz-Carlton, you cannot take that with you. You can't take the pillows either. You can't take that nice comfy robe. Services and the service encounter ends. Your airline flight to that wonderful vacation with your family ends. They perish. Physical products don't end. There is a value in a lifetime. Who knows if fidget spinners, this is a fad that disappeared a year ago, but these things are still around, and they're giving them to you for free at conferences for some reason or another. I don't know. Finally, when we get to the back end of this module, we need to talk about if there is particularly variability, perishability. How do we evaluate services? How do we evaluate service quality? And a bunch of really smart professors got together and they wrote papers for about 15 years, as a matter of fact. And they talked about service equality in terms of 5 different dimensions or 5 areas. And why does my phone keep ringing? Sorry about that. My dad's a good guy. So these 5 dimensions, the first one is reliability, the second one's responsiveness, the third one's assurance, the fourth is empathy, and the fifth is tangibles. Well, reliability, the first one, an iPhone is an iPhone is an iPhone. However, services, because they vary, is the service encounter the same every time, or is close to the same every time? Is it reliable? Could you go to a restaurant on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and the service experience be very similar? That's reliability. Responsiveness. Do you go into the hotel and are you helped right away? And we're going to see in service failure that responsiveness is also important. And assurance. Do you feel okay that the people who are helping you are knowledgeable? Can you trust them? Do you have confidence in these individuals? If you need a deed done to your house and you go to a title insurance individual, do you feel confident that you're going to get the service that you need? That's the assurances. Empathy. Well, empathy is a big deal. Being able to see something from someone else's perspective. A lot of time these service providers are only trying to sell their services. And they're only selling and pushing what they got and not trying to see the service encounter from your perspective and seeing how they can help you. Finally, the tangibles. If you are going to a high-end restaurant or you are going to a high-end hotel or you are spending extra money for business class on an airplane, well, that expensive business class seat better have some nice perks. It better be really great. The hotel that you stay at, it better be, the fancy restaurant better have white linen service. These are the intangibles. So when we talk about measuring services, we measure them in terms of a gap. So this gap is your expectations prior to buying the service, and then finally measuring your experience after using the service. So there's a gap. So pre, you were thinking this. Post, it was really good. There is a positive gap. What if your expectations for this fancy hotel that you're doing your anniversary on is this, and it was kind of just okay? And there's a gap, and it's negative. Pre versus post. Okay? Hopefully you're going to get pre and post, or you're going to get pre, it's better to be higher than pre. Negative gaps are kind of bad. So if we get a gap, we need to recover. There is variability. There is intangibility. There is issues with services. They're delivered by humans for the most part. We could have a whole nother conversation on bots, and bots are coming our way with AI. But for the most part, services are delivered by humans. Okay? So how do we do this? There's that responsiveness then. One of the most important things is to resolve quickly as you possibly can. Don't let it linger. Jump on top of it. It will be appreciated by the consumers. You got to do your best to have a fair solution. You're never going to give everybody their money back. But you might be able to provide an additional free trip or some kind of other perks. A voucher for dinner, something. Some kind of a fair, equitable solution. But the most important thing when we go back to empathy is you're listening to actually know what the problem is. The more you have empathy and you listen, and the faster you can resolve something equitably, that is the level of service recovery you can do when there is a service failure or a negative service gap. Okay? Thank you, thank you, thank you. This is the first of the 4P's product. We have more P's coming your way. Yes? Thank you.